So to cut this circle in the door, I'm just going to make a really simple circle cutting jig for my trim router. So I've taken the base plate off, put that on here to mark where I need to drill and countersink some holes. I'll just take that off to the drill press and do that, and then I'll just cut it into a generic shape, and then all I really have to do is plunge the router bit through here, measure from there to what I want my radius to be, drill a hole, and then I can screw that into the top of the door. So it's a few short minutes later and we've got ourselves the hole cutting jig for the router. I just need to screw it on to the cradle for the trim router, and then you can kind of see here, this is the gist of it. It just pivots around that central point. I need to drill a hole all the way through the door so I can locate the screw on both sides, as I plan to do a bit of the routing from one side, flip it over, and then do some from the other side, so it sort of meets in the middle, and that way it should be a nice clean cut. Well, that's the theory anyway. So I do a few shallow passes until I get about halfway, cleaning it up as I go, and then I'm going to flip it over and stick it down to that MDF panel that you see there with some double-sided heavy-duty adhesive. And the idea there is that when I end up punching through all the way, that central part that I've got the screw fixed into, it's going to want to wander. So hopefully with that double-sided adhesive, it stops it from moving and messing up the hole once I make it the whole way through. So as you can see, we've had a little bit of deviation. My idea to stick this piece down with the double-sided tape didn't work as well as expected, but that's all good. That's very minor, so I'll be able to clean all of that up with the barrel sander and then put a nice round over on both of these faces. Alright, so there we've got the cat door done. For some reason it wasn't filming, so I missed putting this round over on the inside and outside just to make it nice for the cats. So I'll then move on to the next thing, which I have a feeling is going to involve milling up some of this timber and getting started on the desktop itself. Getting big long boards like this flat on the jointer can be a bit of a challenge, and it's always a constant reminder that I need to upgrade to a much bigger jointer. I'm planning eventually to get a jointer thicknesser combo so I can get rid of that yellow DeWalt thicknesser and take up a little bit less shop space. But for the time being, it's just a matter of rinse and repeat, getting these all down to size. I actually end up milling this up thickness-wise over about 3 days, as in the past I've noticed that if I mill it all to the final thickness all in one go, I end up with issues where the humidity or the moisture content within the timber being released and exposed ends up causing it to warp a little bit as it reacclimatizes. So this time round I took the approach of taking a couple of mil off at a time, leaving it overnight to reacclimatize, taking a little bit more off and doing the same over the several days, and it worked out really well this time. I ended up with absolutely no warping in the days to follow and ended up with perfectly flat boards, which is exactly what I want for something this long. With the two faces now flat and parallel, I need to get my edges square and parallel to one another. So to do so, I could do that on the jointer, but with them being so long, there's more room for error. And I've got a long track for my track saw, so I may as well use that to get a perfectly straight and square reference side, and then take them over to the table saw to cut them down to their final size. I did have them at 205 millimeters for milling, and I need them to come down to 200.
Because the two halves of this desk are going to be slotting together in a finger joint configuration, I'm going to be adding splines where they slide together. This has got a twofold sort of effect. It's to help with alignment on the surfaces that extend beyond each other, and it also helps with the strength of the middle connection. So to do so, I'm cutting a 1/2 inch or 12.7mm wide channel 15mm deep on 3 of the interconnecting boards, and in that there will be a receiving spline that gets glued in place to help everything slide together and keep it nice and rigid once it's in place. To square off all the ends, I've decided to clamp the 3 boards together and cut them off with my track saw. However, I accidentally left the rip cut blade on my saw, which is for cutting with the grain, not against it, and it's left a rough cut. So I'll swap that back out for the right blade, move my track over about 1mm and try again, and that's left a much nicer surface. So now that I've got them cut to their square ends, I can reconfigure them to give me the correct location for all of my dominoes, and then move on to getting those cut in. For these 2 big large panels, I'll be using the biggest dominoes my machine can cut. They're a 10mm thick by 50mm deep, so they'll be adding a fair bit of strength to each glue up and assisting with alignment along the way. So the last thing I need to do before I can actually do a full test fit of the top is just make up the splines to go in those grooves that I routed earlier. So I need to get them to the perfect thickness and the right width. And then with the assistance of a few dominoes and some clamps, I can mock this thing up and see how it slides.
So here's a bit more of a close-up of what we've got going on here. So we've got these splines now just laid in place to help me mock everything up. It is, because these are all exactly the same size, and once these are glued, like clamped and glued together, it is going to be an extremely tight fit through this space here when it comes to assembling it on site. So to play it safe, I might just really lightly hand plane these faces just to there to give it, I'm talking like 1/4 of a millimeter split over both sides, so about 1/8 of a millimeter off each side, just to make sure there is enough room for them to slide together once they've been glued up. As last thing I want is to do the glue up and then not be able to put this thing back together. And then we've also got these dominoes are going to be going in here on each of these ends, which will help locate and stabilize the joint. And then we've also got that reinforced steel C-channel that we'll be bridging the gaps. So I'm pretty confident that that's all working out how I planned. The main thing is just going to be come glue up to get these perfectly aligned this way. So if I have this one too far this way and that one too far that way, it's obviously gonna mean I'll have to trim bits off to get it to all mate up, and I don't really want to do that. So I probably can't put it off for too much longer, but I will need to get this glued up and then put aside so I can start working on the C-channel underneath, routing those in